What's up, people? Well, we made it through another week, and if you're watching this, this means that we're all alive. So, and it was kind of a rough week. I mean, it was a good week, but some weeks are harder than others. So let's have a psychedelic weekend, man. Let's listen to some good psych. Let me address something first. I'm sure you are sick to death of hearing about Record Store Day, but everybody has an opinion, so let me just throw in my 30-second thing on Record Store Day. I'm cool with it. People want to have Record Store Day, have fun, and it's meant to have fun, but I saw a lot of depressed folks out there, a lot of rants, and they didn't get what they wanted, and this and that. I'm sorry, I don't know what to say. For me, my relationship with Record Store Day is I look to see if they got anything good, and then a couple days later, I'll find a good price online, and I usually do. Like this year, that Beatles single, I wasn't interested anyway, but that's one of the ones that kind of went way up. I saw it, for the last time I looked was a week ago, and it was over $100. Somebody wanted over $100. Things may have changed in a week as I haven't looked. But on this Record Store Day, I went to a Renaissance fair with my family. I spent the day with my family. And there's a Renaissance festival called Scarborough Fair that's here in Waxahachie, Texas. It's about, a little over an hour drive from our house. And we try to go every year, in the springtime. And we had a blast. The weather was beautiful. I wasn't even thinking about records or Record Store Day. And then when I got home, I saw a lot of videos where people were unhappy. But that's my opinion, man. It's not worth getting stressed out about. Have fun. And I did buy one Record Store Day goodie, and it was the Rush album. What was it? The Cygnus X1 or Cygnus X Book 1 and 2? I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's a couple of the longer songs, Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres. And that looked cool, and I got it for a decent price. So maybe next week I'll show it if I haven't. And I'm sure if you watch a lot of these videos, you've probably already seen it a dozen times. Well, you have to see it again. So let's start our weekend off. Kind of mellow. Let's ease into it. The Beatles, Rubber Soul. Stone Cold Classic, 1965. Well, December of 1965 it was released. And to me, this is when the Beatles started being, kind of their period. This is when I started getting interested in the Beatles. I know they had great albums before, Hard Day's Night, Help, and their earlier stuff, but things took a turn on this album. And this period on up is my favorite period of the Beatles. Basically, 67 through 70 is my favorite period, but, you gotta have this one. And, lots of times I see it listed as, top 10 psychedelic albums of all times, but is it really psychedelic? Maybe it was a precursor to psychedelia, and I'm sure lots of folks will disagree with me. But the songs are great. They got looser, they got better, and the next one after this was Revolver, which they kind of go hand in hand, if you notice, it's almost like you have like Volume 1 and then Volume 2. A lot of the songs are interchangeable. The only song that's really crazy and differential that's not on this album is Tomorrow Never Knows, and that's on Revolver. And that was kind of like, okay, this is the last song on this album, wait and see what's next. So, start the weekend with that. Now, speaking of psychedelia, there's a band who I've just recently discovered. I'm discovering stuff all the time. And this band is called Stupid Cosmonaut. It's a 2017 release on Drone Rock Records, and the album is called Algol. It is very spacey, very trippy. this, when I was talking about the Beatles, Rubber Soul and I being that psychedelic, well, fast forward 50 years, and you hear something like this, and they've really expanded. And everything kind of starts with the Beatles. So, but this is a true blue psychedelic album. There's plenty of jamming, very mellow stuff. If you listen closely enough, there's some female vocals. It's kind of funny on some of my devices, because I got to download. It sounds better on my iPad than it does in my car. I can actually hear stuff a little bit better. So number 2 for our nice psychedelic weekend, or our soundtracks of our psychedelic weekend, Stupid Cosmonaut. So after you get done with that, how about a little comedy? And I hope you guys have this, or have at least heard it. This is a great album, a great counterculture album. It's called Child's Garden of Grass, a pre-legalization comedy written by, well, it was based on a book by Jack Margolis, and he was a counterculture writer back in the 60s and early to mid-70s. I'm really not sure what he's done lately, if he's done anything. I think he's still alive. But this album, I'm just going to let you look at this, to look at all the cool little artifacts in there, is probably the most real album about getting stoned that I've ever heard. Yes, Cheech and Chong is funny, they got some good stories, but they're talking about conversations and eating, and it just, you have that feeling. I mean, it's like, some of these are, let me read you some of the titles. And they're not groundbreaking, but just think, eating food. So they talk about eating food while you're stoned, listening to music, making love, funniness, how things that really are kind of stupid, or people think it's the funniest thing they ever heard. And the actors that do this are great. So if you haven't heard this one, once again, A Child's Garden of Grass, do yourself a favor. I do think it is on YouTube. And this guy, he also wrote other books. What was the name? The Ins and Outs of Orgies, Impotence, Always Having to Say That You're Sorry. Then there's one, I'm probably butchering the name, but it was Cooking for Orgies, or something to that effect. It was basically a cookbook. And then, of course, Child's Garden of Grass. I don't have any of them, but I probably will. I like counterculture writing. I like the books that were released in the late 60s and early 70s. They have a special tone, a special freedom about them. And I will probably, one of these days, pick those up. So, we get through that. Whether this is going to be your wake-up album for Saturday morning, or a go-to-bed album, this is acid rock. Yes, everybody calls it krautrock, but this is a great acid rock album. This was 1971. It's Guru Guru. It's an album called Hinton, which I'm not sure what that is. And it sounds like a lot of the krautrock being made today. And I will always mention these guys because they were my favorite bands of the days. It's called The Electric Moon. This sounds like Electric Moon almost 50 years ago. It's not really mellow by any means of the word. It's just a lot of loud guitars, but it's very accessible. There's some vocals. Well, when I say vocals, I don't mean singing, but they're talking around and they're goofing off. It's a great album. The album cover, it's got a male butt on it, and they even managed to make that psychedelic. And then there's the butt again, see? And then when you open it up, you get the butt again. So, but who cares about that? Really, the music is fantastic. So, I would say wake up to this. This is a good wake-up record. Now, here's a 2017 release from a band called Dire Wolf, or Dire Wolves. It's called Excursions to Cloudland. It is on one of my favorite labels, Beyond Beyond is Beyond. And this is their second. Is it their second? This is their second release of the year. Already showed their first release of the year, and I've already ordered Beyond's third release. I'm getting that in June. That's by a band called The Mirrors. These guys are from San Francisco. It is mostly instrumental psychedelia. It doesn't seem to be as random or as improvised as a lot of the psychedelic albums or psychedelic instrumental albums I listen to. There seems like there was actually a theme and some writing going on in this. It can be rough in spots, but it's good. You can really get lost in it. And like the title says, excursions to Cloudland, you can, if you close your eyes and get into it, it will take you to places. Like every good psychedelic album should do. So let's go into the evening, Saturday evening, with some Doors. You know, I don't listen to the Doors that often, but when I do, I realize what a great band they were. It's mostly rock and roll, kind of rock and blues, and not psychedelic, but it does remind you of that time, of the 60s and what was going on, and what a great frontman Jim Morrison was. Was he the first great frontman? No, probably Elvis Presley. But I could be wrong with that, correct me. I was having a conversation with my coworker the other day, and we were talking about great frontmen. And David Lee Roth came up. I thought he was great. He thought Bon Scott was one of the greatest ones. There's many great ones, but in the 60s, Morrison. And what do we have? There's a couple of hits on here. Roadhouse Blues, which seems like everybody's favorite. I mean, you can't beat Woke Up This Morning and I Got Myself a Beer. That's rebellion, man. You know, it's like, screw the bacon, I'm having a beer. Waiting for the Sun is another one. And the rest are good, but I don't know if they actually made it to the radio. Land Ho, I love Land Ho. Maggie McGill, Indian Summer, The Spy, Peace Frog. So, great album. Great for a nice weekend of relaxation. There's our good gatefold. And of course, I think there's a story behind the album cover. This was a real hotel. They saw it, and they wanted to get their picture taken in front of the sign, and the owner said no. And somehow they managed to do it. They snuck in there, got a picture, and the rest is history. And I don't think the Morrison Hotel exists anymore. Can't remember what decade it was, but it was either destroyed or went out of business. Okay. Now here is a good one. And I did not even know that it existed until a couple weekends ago. I was at my favorite record store, shopping around, and they got a little section where the employees recommend albums. And some of the recommendations are very common and easy, like, you know, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, AC/DC, but some are very creative and obscure. And this was one of them. It's called The Perfumed Garden, read by Chitra Miyagi. Basically what The Perfumed Garden is, it was a book written in, I think, the 1500s in Arabian texts. Exactly what country it originated from, I'm not sure, but it was a sex manual. Yeah, we're not just having sex in this century. I mean, it's a very popular thing to do. So somebody wrote a book about this. I can't remember the author. And it's a good manual on sex. You know, how to pick up girls, how to avoid diseases. And it is read by this lady here. And she's very sexy. Chitra Miyagi. And in the back, there's a lot of sitar, a lot of Eastern style music, Indian music, if you will. And it works very well. I would say that this isn't like a novelty album. This is a good, serious psychedelic album. You want to prepare yourself for it. You know, kick back and relax. Nothing for the car, but for a nice evening at home, just to kind of get into the mood. A nice feel of the 60s. And what year? I should say what year. I think this was 67 or 68. It was on Pulsar Records. So, and you know what? I haven't explored Pulsar Records, but I should look them up, see what else they got. So let's go into Sunday. Kind of the afterglow of a nice, crazy weekend. And one of my favorite albums of all times, a top 10, a Desert Island disc, The Church, Sometime Anywhere. Now, The Church, most people know them from Under the Milky Way at Night. That was their biggest song in 1988. But they made music after that, folks, lots of it. And their albums in the 90s are really hard to beat as far as trippiness and psychedelia. At one point, I can't remember what album it was on. I think it was the album before this. They were all on opium. They had a fan that could get them some opium. So it was liquid opium, and they were in the studio just sipping on this stuff. I don't know anything about opium, but I read it in Steve Kilbee's book. Steve Kilbee is the lead singer, and that's what he said. They were all walking around these little vials sipping on opium, and a lot of that sound of the 90s kind of came from that mellow, laid-back vibe in the studio. This one, at this point, there was only two members of the Church, Marty Wilson Piper and Steve Kilbee, and they made this wonderful album. I mean, it's my favorite Church album. And some folks will say, well, it's not a real Church album because they're not all in there, but I say screw it, man. It's just the Church. It sounds like the Church. Great album. So if you haven't heard this or haven't picked it up, check it out. All right. Now here's a good one. Maybe a lot of y'all have not heard of it before. It's a band called Preteen Zenith. Now, you see the album cover's a little, but this came with this. This is supposed to be the album cover. What do they call it? Like screen art? I think that's what this was. Preteen Zenith is a band composed of two other bands. Tripping Daisy from the 90s, and when Tripping Daisy concluded, I think it was 98 or 99, Tim DeLauder, the lead singer, formed a band called the Polyphonic Spree. And if you haven't seen the Polyphonic Spree, you probably have and don't know it, but there's like 20 people in the band, and they wear robes, and there's a little choir, and there's harps, and there's flutes, and there's guitar, and there's drums, and theremin, and all types of crazy psychedelic pop sounds that are coming from this band. Well, Tim DeLauder had a little side project in 2011. I think that's when this was released. No, well, this was released in 2012, but I think it was recorded about 2011. And we get Preteen Zenith. It is numbered. I think they made 2,000 of these on vinyl. I got like 874. Erykah Badu is on here. Erykah, the last time I heard, she lives here in Dallas. And this is a Dallas band, so she was probably pretty easy to get a hold of and say, hey, you want to sing on a song? And it's really good. This is a great psychedelic pop album. You know, it's hard to say whether it's essential or not, but for my collection, it is. Because I've had the CD for quite a long time, and I just needed it on vinyl. So the last album for our weekend of pleasurable listening is an album that was recommended by a fellow YouTuber, Derek Higgins. He showcased this a couple of weeks ago, and I had to go out and buy it. Just on his recommendations, he made it sound so good. Richard Barber Barbieri, Richard Barbieri. It's called Planets Plus Persona, or Planets and Persona. This is a double album. Richard Barbieri, I guess the first time people heard of him was in a band called Japan in the late 70s, early 80s. I'm not a big fan of Japan. What is that, post-punk maybe? I think I've heard some other stuff. Maybe I really need to explore more, but I don't know much about him. I know that he was in the band, their keyboard player. The next big band was Porcupine Tree that he was in, and still is, from what I understand. And he played with them from, I don't know, 15, 16 years. Lots of great albums. And I don't know how many solo albums he has, but I'm new to him, really. I'm new to Richard Barbieri. I'm acting like I know a lot about him, but this is just what I found on the internet. And this is a come-down album. This is a soul-soothing album. There's ambience, there's some jazz fusion, there's some krautrock, but it's all on a very low metal level. Nothing gets crazy and I don't know the word, but crazy or whatever. It's more of a hypnotic album. And it's double album, beautiful. He just released this in 2017, and you can hear, I have not seen the whole album out on YouTube, but you can hear clips of it, and it's highly recommended. So, that's it. That is our soundtrack for a psychedelic weekend. I think I've done one of these before, so this is part 2, and I'll do other ones. You know what? I actually did have another piece to this. Flaming Lips. So on the Saturday night, if you're staying up late, want to have something to watch, this is a Flaming Lips concert. It's called UFOs at the Zoo, and they did a show at the Oklahoma City Zoo. And it's cool. It shows people going up to the zoo and pictures of animals or clips of animals and this and that. And they do some of their classic songs. And this is a DVD. This is not so much a soundtrack. There are 24 songs on this, plus some bonus tracks. So, there you go. We can top it off at that. Alright guys, I hope you have a nice weekend, a nice week, and we will see you when we see you. See you on the flip side, and keep spinning.